In this video, I'm going to give you my full card predictions for UFC Vegas 102. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Apologies for the late upload. There was travel time, there was recovery time from the Eagles Super Bowl, and I got slapped up at UFC 312. It happens. I always say at the beginning of the video, let's make some money this week. Last week, we didn't make money. But like Usher once said, situations will arise in our lives, but you got to be smart about it. And maybe if the video hits 1,500 likes, we will sing You Don't Have to Call in the next video. Maybe, just maybe. But at the top of the card, we have Jared Cannonier. He's fighting Gregory Robocop Rodrigues. I'm going to put the Barack Obama impression on the shelf this week because we're all business. Interesting one at middleweight because both guys have a clear path to victory, and that path leads to the same place, and that is a knockout win. Because on one side, Gregory Rodrigues, for as offensively gifted as he is, the defense is questionable. Stands very tall, which I really don't mind, but he leaves his chin way up in the air and he tends to get stunned with punches and he doesn't react the way you want to. You see the Frankenstein reaction, or you just see him start throwing offense back. And you don't really like to see that. You want to see if a guy gets hurt or a guy gets rocked or a guy gets stunned. You want to see him get on his bike, avoid some more damage, clear the cobwebs, and get himself back into the action. Granted, not too many people have been able to make him pay for that kind of style, but still, you see it pretty often. It worries me against a guy who can throw a lot of power like Jared Cannonier. But for Jared Cannonier, and if you've watched the channel for a while, you know I'm a Jared Cannonier kind of guy. I'm getting worried. He's getting up there in age. Last couple of fights haven't looked that good, at least toward the end of them. And I worry about how he's going to hold up against the power coming back from Robocop. Cannonier's fought for a long time, and he's taken a good amount of damage along the way. He's been knocked down in the UFC 3 times, and outside of those 3 knockout losses, he's been knocked down in 4 other fights. Plus, when you look at that fight against Nasruddin Imavov had him on skates and almost knocked him down, almost knocked him out. The ref steps in a little early, but we saw where it was going. Against Caio Borralho, the ref probably should have stopped the fight because that was a pretty scary knockdown in the 5th round. So at 40 years old, having taken a lot of damage already, I see him having a hard time dealing with that explosive power from Gregory Rodrigues because he carries it not only early in these fights, but late into these fights as well. You see that in the Brad Tavares fight when he finished him in the 3rd. And Brad Tavares has been knocked out a couple times before, but normally he's good to give you a nice 3 rounds. He's a pretty durable guy. But even outside of that, we've seen him take really durable guys and make them look not like it. It's like in The Longest Yard where he says, the guy's so fast he makes fast people look not fast. Gregory Rodrigues hits so hard he makes tough people look not tough. Examples of this, you look at the Julian Marquez fight. Julian Marquez had never been finished. He was making a career off of just Homer Simpsoning guys. Anything you're throwing back at me, I'm going to walk through it. Robocop dropped him 3 times inside of 3 minutes and knocked him out in the 1st round. You look at the fight against the Iron Turtle, Jung Young Park, who has fought for a long time, has 1 knockout loss on his record. Who is it? It's Gregory Rodrigues. The dude lands heavy and he knows how to pour it on when guys are hurt. He's got that killer instinct, very nasty in the clinch as well, which I think he can have a lot of success this week in the clinch up against the fence. And he does it not only with the dirty boxing and the hard knees to the body, but he can also get his trips and throws going. And we've seen Jared Cannonier taken down plenty of times in the UFC. He normally does a really good job of stuffing when guys shoot for takedowns, double leg, single leg, very strong hips. It's like running into a fire hydrant. But where he can struggle and where Robocop thrives is getting those takedowns with the upper part of your body, right? Getting those trips, getting those throws from the clinch. That's where Robocop can take him down here. Now, if this was Jared Cannonier, say, even 3 years ago, I'd probably take him in this one. But after the recent performances, the age, I don't think he's going to hold up that well over 5 rounds against a guy like this. So give me the Brazilian to get it done. Give me Gregory Rodrigues to win this fight by knockout. Next, we have a fight against Calvin Kattar. He's fighting Youssef Zalal this week. We've talked about this before. I am the head of the Youssef Zalal fan club. I was before he got cut from the UFC. I've been this way for a long time. I was a Youssef Zalal fan before it was cool, as a hipster would say. Now, I'm telling you right now, the Moroccan Devil 2.0 is one of the best 45ers on planet Earth, and he's going to show it again this week. Calvin Kattar's a savage and deserves his flowers for the kind of fights that he's put on in the UFC. 7-6 in the promotion, but not all records are created equal because they're putting him in there with some of the best. So you can't really blame him for getting matched up and losing against guys like Max Holloway, Josh Emmett, Arnold Allen, Aljamain Sterling, Zabit, Hanato Moicano. Like, it happens. These are all excusable losses. But he's getting matched up with these guys, and that's just the reality of it. And now he faces another elite featherweight in Youssef Zalal, and it's just not going to go well for him. Not only do I think Youssef Zalal wins, but I think he finishes Calvin Kattar and is the only man to do so in the UFC. Now, you look at the record, you'll say, oh, he lost by knockout to Arnold Allen. He blew his knee out kind of freak injury thing. It doesn't really count as a finish in my book. No. Youssef Zalal is going to finish him. I think he submits him this week. Since he's returned to the UFC, 3 wins, all submissions, all in the first round and a half. The dude is a problem, so tell Diego Lopez we're looking for him. Tell Movzar we're looking for him. Tell Topuria we want our rematch. Give me Youssef Zalal to win this fight inside the distance. And if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, and if you don't mind, give me a go birds in the chat. More middleweights on the main card. Edmen Shahbazyan fighting Budka this week. The line could be wider for this fight, and I'd be perfectly okay with it. I don't think Budka holds a spot in the UFC for all that long. Gassed out in under 5 minutes in his UFC debut. I get it. Short notice, came out, wrestled a lot. I could see why he got tired. I also think it's inexcusable. And he followed that up with missing weight against Andre Petroski in a fight where he got controlled on the mat for most of it and ended up losing every round. Edmen Shahbazyan's faced better fighters in the division. He's going to have the striking advantage here and probably the biggest striking advantage on the card outside of maybe one guy that we'll talk about later. And as long as he's not giving up takedowns early in this one and getting tired because of it, I don't think the fight's going to be all that close. Budka's only chance in this fight is to get it to the mat early, so I think he's going to come at him fast, try to get the clinch, try to get these takedowns, and that's where Edmen's going to be able to punish him with uppercuts, knees down the middle, staying on his bike, 1-2, keep moving, and I think he's just going to chew him up and probably finish him before the 3rd round. Give me Edmen Shahbazyan to win this fight by knockout. Next we have a fight between Ismael Bonfim. He's fighting Nazim Sadykhov this week. The Bonfim brothers are back, and I'm telling you right now, they're going to go 1-1. I believe that so much so that if Gabriel Bonfim wins early, you should just place a bet on Nazim Sadykhov. I don't think both of these guys are going to win, but I also don't think that happens. Foreshadowing. No, I like Ismael Bonfim in this fight because his only UFC losses to Benoit Saint-Denis pre-Poirier taking his soul. Outside of that, Bonfim's looked really good. He throws everything with bad intentions, really good on the mat. And between these two, I think he just fights with a bit more intensity because Sadykhov is very cool, very relaxed in there, but I think that works against him at times. You see that fight against Vyacheslav Borshov, he was getting tagged and he didn't look all that urgent and he came out with a weak first round, dominant second round, and he almost finished the fight, got 10-8 on all the scorecards, or I think 2 out of the 3 scorecards. But then in round 3, foot was off the gas and he ends up dropping that round. Just not really enough ferocity. And even against Terrence McKinney, he's getting dominated in the first round of that fight, ends up getting to a dominant position in the second round, but hangs on to the fence and it keeps him in that position and the ref just did nothing about it. Pretty egregious fence grabbing in my opinion that probably should have lost him the position. And if you look at the Evan Elder fight in his UFC debut, dude was down 2-0 on every judge's scorecard before a headbutt, clash of heads, whatever you want to call it, created a cut that ended the fight, and it ended the fight in his favor. It looks like a knockout on his record, and he was kind of getting worked in that one. It was a good fight, but he was losing. So Nazim Sadykhov is 2-0-1 in the UFC, but not without controversy. I think that Ismael Bonfim might just be a little bit better everywhere. I think he's going to give us consistent effort throughout each round, mix in takedowns more effectively. We saw him look great last time out against Vince Pichel, where he was patient, he was accurate, and his last round was his best round. A lot of people like Bonfim in this one. You can see that the line has swelled since open. I think most people are just seeing what I'm seeing and thinking right now, that he's better everywhere and he should look the part this week. Give me Ismael Bonfim to win this fight by decision. And he will probably find himself on the official betting article this week. I don't think we're going to have a Bonfim parlay on there, but we're going to have Ismael Bonfim most likely on the official betting article this week. The official betting article last week got cooked, and I'm kicking myself in hindsight for not just putting my life on Zhang Weili because that fight was never close. But that's on me. Should have put my life on Zhang Weili and then should have put my life and afterlife on the Eagles. But we'll get back on track this week. That could be found on KunithMMA.com, official betting article, DFS strategy guide, lineup optimizer, data model, tools, all of that good stuff, and the community parlay. The DFS stuff is going to be especially valuable this week because there's going to be no final picks video this week. So just keep an eye out for that if you're on the site. If you're not, that's linked in the description and in a pinned comment. Back to the breakdown. More middleweights. We've got Rodolfo Vieira. He's fighting Andre Petroski this week. A grappler versus grappler contest. So what should we do? We should pick the better grappler, right? Well, I would say that Rodolfo Vieira is rightfully favored. He's one of the hardest guys to stop in the sport when he gets to his spot. Now for Andre Petroski, I think he deserves a lot of credit for his UFC run, 7-2 in the promotion. A lot of guys can't say that. And most of his wins have looked pretty dominant, except for that Gerald Meerschaert win where it really could have went either way. He picks up a split decision W in that one. And I'll never forget picking him to beat Nick Maximov as the biggest underdog on the card, and he ends up beating Nick Maximov in like under 90 seconds or something like that. It was great. The dude is talented, and where he might surprise people this week is with his ability to stay safe on the mat, because it's hard to say for sure if he's going to be able to do that. But one thing you can say about Andre Petroski is that he's spent a lot of time on the mat in the UFC. Very little of that has he been in a bad position. No, he's almost always in the driver's seat. And against Rodolfo Vieira, I think that could be important, because if Vieira gets stuck on bottom, it doesn't really matter how good he is. These guys in MMA today are so good at keeping top position, staying tight, staying sticky, that they're probably going to stay safe. We even saw that with Tatiana Suarez and Zhang Weili last week. Zhang Weili went to the ground with her intentionally, and Suarez just wasn't able to get much going after the first round because she was stuck on her back. The sweeps weren't there, getting her elevated wasn't there, armbar from guard, guillotine attempts, they weren't really there. And Petroski has really good control on the mat, similar to like a Trey Ogden in a lower weight class. So if he gets that there, if he gets him to the mat and he got Rodolfo Vieira flat on his back, I think he can end up riding out the round and winning that round. But I think the most likely scenario is that it plays out a bit differently. No one really wants to take Rodolfo Vieira to the mat. I think the only guy in the UFC who attempted takedowns against him was Dustin Stoltzfus, and he went 0 for 3 on takedown attempts. And they were more just kind of like give you a look, not really any intention behind it. But guys don't wrestle him because they don't want to find themselves on top, because they're afraid to get swept, or they don't want to run into a guillotine or something crazy like that. But Vieira will wrestle. He will sell out for the takedowns. Even against Chris Curtis, he went 0 for 20 on takedowns. You think that guy's not going to do everything he can to get the fight to the mat? He will. And once he gets on top, I think he's going to find himself getting an arm triangle here. He's won most of his fights in the UFC by arm triangle. I don't think Petroski has good enough striking to keep Vieira at range, and I don't think he's going to try to take him down in this fight either. So give me the black belt hunter here. Give me the better grappler. Give me Rodolfo Vieira to win this fight by submission. Next, we have a fight between Jose Delgado. He's making his UFC debut this week against Connor Matthews. If you haven't watched Jose Delgado fight, do yourself a favor, go back and watch it. It doesn't take that long because he gets guys out of there like that. He starts very fast. He throws a lot of hard kicks to each level. He never throws one punch at a time. Even with his kicks, everything just seems to be in combination, and everything looks fast. He's getting big reactions out of his opponents as well, and I think that makes all the difference here, because Connor Matthews is good on the mat, but on the feet, I think he's going to be 2 steps behind. And he's probably going to sell out to get this fight to the mat, but I think Jose Delgado's just a better athlete here, and he's going to be able to keep his feet. And at that striking range, he probably picks apart the much slower Connor Matthews. We saw Dennis Bazookia put him out, and Dennis Bazookia has had a real rough run in the UFC. I think Delgado's a much better talent, fighting out of one of the better gyms in the country, especially for the lower weight divisions. And I could just see him doing what he does best here, starting fast, finishing the fight early. The quick start feels kind of like Terrence McKinney, except he seems more grounded, better technique, more balance. He isn't swinging for the fences. He's just making contact, and he's doing it as often as possible. So a lot to like about Jose Delgado this week. I think he gets it done in 1. The best bet for this fight is under a round and a half, because even if he loses, Connor Matthews typically does his work in the first round by submission. So last week I gave you under a half a round in the Tafa fight that sat at plus 230. The week before that, I gave you under a half a round in the Terrence McKinney fight that also ended up hitting at plus money. So don't miss the boat on this one. It's one and done. Go under 1.5 rounds this week. Give me Jose Delgado to win by knockout. Next, we have a fight between Angela Hill. She's fighting Ketlen Souza this week. Talk about a movie we've seen before. We've seen Angela Hill in the same situation where you've got a promising prospect on their way up. They run into Angie Hill, and then they kind of get humbled because there's holes in their game. She takes advantage of those holes because she's super smart, and she wins the fight, and they end up having to go back to the drawing board, and then they end up being better because of it. And if you want a more specific example, this fight to me is Angela Hill, Denise Gomes 2. D. Gomes, Brazilian, powerful, aggressive striker, taking a big step up in competition against an intelligent veteran who's been doing this for a long time. What happens in that fight? Angela Hill wrestles her to death and ends up winning on the scorecard. Same thing's going to happen here. Ketlen Souza was giving up takedowns to Marnik Man. We're going to do a little MMA math here, so just stick with me. Ketlen Souza's giving up takedowns to Marnik Man. Marnik Man is not UFC caliber. She's a bad MMA wrestler. And to put that in perspective for you, Marnik Mann got out-wrestled by Josephine Knudsen. Josephine Knudsen got out-wrestled 8 takedowns to 0 against Piera Rodrigues. In most divisions in MMA, but especially the women's divisions, the better wrestler most of the time is going to win the fight. And Angela Hill's the much better wrestler here. As far as striking goes, I don't think she has as much power as Souza, but she's got the Muay Thai kickboxing to keep this competitive on the feet until she gets her takedowns. This fight is sitting at about pick'em odds right now, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I know that Angela Hill doesn't typically get love from the odds makers, but I would have set the line at -175 Angie Hill. So for us to be getting the kind of line that we're getting on Angela Hill in this situation, we've seen it multiple times already. So you take these young promising prospects, she typically gets over on them. Give me Angela Hill to win this fight by decision. Next we have a fight between Jared Gordon fighting Mashrabjon Ruziboev this week. This was supposed to be Cowyer Fernandez against Jared Gordon, and I loved Fernandez in this matchup. So now that the fight has changed, I looked at this, I saw that the odds were super wide, and I thought, hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right. Look at the odds, I'm saying, okay, the odds are pretty crazy, we might be live here. You look at the record, I see this guy's fighting out of Uzbekistan, he's much younger, decent win streak. I thought, okay, we definitely got a live one here. Then you start to look at the fights that he's had, and this dude is a can crusher of the highest order. He can't walk through the non-perishable section of the grocery store because if he does, there's going to be a mess on the staff's hands. He fights guys with little to no experience. The guys that he does fight that are highly experienced are coming in with just some of the worst records you've ever seen for people with that many fights. He hasn't fought Jay Ellis, but I'm sure if Jay Ellis came calling, this guy'd be licking his chops. But then you see he has a couple of losses on his record, and you see the guys that he's losing to, these are the only competent guys. When he's not fighting male men, he's losing. And that's a problem because Jared Gordon is too good for a guy like this to just come up off the couch, just show up and beat. Jared Gordon's going to make it a tough night for him in his debut this week. And I expect him to pick up a much needed finish in this one because you look at his last 5 fights, Jared Gordon's got robbed on 2 bad decisions. He got head-butted by Bobby Green, and he ended up winning the other 2. But really, he should be lossless in his last 5, I think he ends up hurting this guy with his boxing multiple times in this fight, ends up getting the fight to the mat, finding a submission there. Just too big of a step up in competition for a guy that has a history of coming up short in similar positions. So give me Jared Gordon to win this fight. I think he wins inside the distance, and that's going to be a way for you to get a much better line because right now you're laying some serious chalk on Flash Gordon if you just play the money line. Next we have a fight between Rafeal Estevam. He's fighting Jesus Aguilar this week. Estevam's been out of action for a while. He's only had 1 fight in the UFC. That was a win over Charles Johnson where he was hanging on for dear life. Took Charles Johnson down a whole lot in that fight early, controlled him for most of the fight, but at striking range he had nada. In his fight in Contender Series though, he looked dominant and got the fight to the mat, landed a lot of ground and pound wins by knockout early in the second. Now on the other side, Jesus Aguilar has rattled off 3 nice wins in a row. He has the quick win knockout over Shannon Ross, knocked him out in I think 17 seconds with one of the cleanest overhands you're ever going to see. Wins a split over Matheus Mendonça in a very close fight obviously, and then a quick submission over Stuart Nickel with that guillotine, and his guillotine is nasty. He's got tons of confidence in it. He's not afraid to jump it at any time. We've talked about this before. Guillotine shouldn't work in the UFC, and they largely don't, but we saw him nearly finish Tatsuro Taira with it in his UFC debut, just slept Stuart Nickel with it as a plus 350 underdog and did that right away early in the first. And I'm not surprised to see him at plus money here because he tends to be the underdog in these fights, but I think the line is a little bit wide because for Rafeal Estevam, he didn't look great against Charles Johnson, he just wrestled a lot, and he's undefeated, so you're going to expect his line to have a little bit of juice. But that fight against Charles Johnson was 14 months ago. He missed weight twice in the UFC already. He's only fought once in the last 2.5 years. And he's going to be shooting for takedowns relentlessly in this fight. And that means Jesus Aguilar is going to be jumping guillotine relentlessly in this fight. So I think to bet on Rafeal Estevam at this price is just dangerous. Still a lot of unknowns. And Jesus Aguilar, he has some momentum. He has the technique that's going to be good against the wrestler. And I think he goes out there and I think he gets it done. I think he jumps the gilly. I think he's a silly goose this week and it's going to pay off for him. Probably does it early on one of the first or couple of takedown attempts coming from Estevam. At striking range, I don't think he's completely outgunned either. Give me Jesus Aguilar to win this fight. I think he wins by submission. Next we have a fight between Gabriel Bonfim. He's fighting Khaos Williams this week. I told you one of the brothers are going to lose and I already picked the other one, so the cat's out of the bag. Now for Gabriel Bonfim, to show respect. The guy is a monster, right? 16-1. You don't get like that by just being a guy. Not only is he a monster, but he's got more ways to win this fight than Khaos Williams does. But Williams has the power, and that's the great separator here. He hits as hard as anybody at 170 pounds. He's also got the reach advantage here. Strong, athletic guy who's going to stuff some early takedown attempts as well. We saw Bonfim run through guys at the start of his UFC run, but then he gassed out and got finished by Nicholas Dalby. Nicholas Dalby doesn't finish anybody. So now we see the adjustment in his game. Okay, let me use my skills. Let me be the talented guy I am, but let me pace myself. Let me be a bit more patient. That's what we saw against Ange Loosa. He ends up winning a decision against Ange Loosa, but Loosa has no power. Loosa is not dangerous. Loosa manages fights and doesn't even do a great job of managing fights. No, when Khaos Williams lands, he stuns guys. He lands with a different type of capash. And that's why I think Gabriel Bonfim's going to be in trouble here, because it's going to be pick your poison, right? He might try to be more patient here like he was with Ange Loosa, or he might try to start fast like he did against everybody else. Either way, I think he gets punished for it, because if he's patient, that means he's going to give Khaos Williams the time and space to set his feet, lean into these punches, and just let his strikes go. If he's aggressive from the start, then Williams might catch him on his way in, hurt him early, and if he's hurt early, I don't know if he's going to be able to contend for a whole 3 rounds after that. Either way, I think Williams' boxing, punching power, length, all that's going to serve him pretty well this week, and I could see him getting Bonfim out of there as a result. So give me the power. Give me the underdog. Give me Khaos Williams to win this fight by knockout. Next, we have a fight between Vince Morales. He is welcoming Elijah Smith to the UFC. Elijah Smith, youth, athleticism, momentum, all on his side. He's finished 5 of his 7 wins. His father is his coach, who was also a professional fighter at a time. Physically, Smith looks great, tall and long for the division, moves pretty well, very composed for 22 years old, and that's why he's favored here. I don't love the matchup for him, but I could see why he's favored here. In his fight in Contender Series, he fought a tough dude who ate a ton of shots, kept walking him down, and actually stole the 3rd round from Smith with that pace and that pressure. But Elijah Smith did enough through the first 2 and ended up winning that fight and giving a good account of himself, but I don't feel great about seeing him lose the 3rd round. On top of that, Smith's only loss came in the 3rd round by knockout in a fight where he was winning. That's concerning against a guy like Vince Morales, who he's 34, right? There's not a whole lot of time left, right? How much longer is Vince Morales going to fight? 2, 3 more years? At best, 4 or 5 more years, right? So the window is not super wide open. He needs to not only get his checks, but he needs to get 2 checks here, because he went 3-6, I think, throughout his UFC run so far. This is his 2nd run in the promotion. You need to get these checks, man, right? They're not just gonna give you money for showing up. You're probably not getting a ton of sponsorships and stuff like that. So Vince Morales, highly motivated, obviously, to get the win here, and he doesn't have as much time, right? Elijah Smith could be garbage for 8 years and still not hit his prime. He's fine. But I think Morales presents some interesting challenges for him this week, because Vince Morales is very tough, right? You're not going to see a whole lot of guys that are hurting him with strikes. He's going to force this young man to fight a hard 15 minutes. And Morales is coming out of a good gym, trains right there in Vegas with some of the best bantamweights in the UFC, so he's not really traveling all that far for this, and he can win this fight. Where I could see him having success here is by putting a lot of pressure on Smith early, looking for takedowns, throwing knees in the clinch against the fence. These are all things we saw him do against Taylor Lapilus, and Taylor Lapilus is worlds beyond what Elijah Smith is right now. Lapilus was a little bit too sharp, a little bit too technical, a little bit too clean. It just landed too many strikes for Morales to really close the gap. But Morales did do his best work in the 3rd round, arguably won that round. And he showed a lot of toughness in that fight. And that fight was in Paris in front of the Lapilus crowd, right? They wanted him to win. They wanted Morales to lose. And that was kind of like his 2nd debut. So I could see there being a lot of nervous energy. Same thing could be said for Elijah Smith. He's not fighting in unfamiliar territory. They're still in the apex, but it's a UFC debut. A lot of nervous energy, and I think that Vince Morales is going to make him expend a lot of that energy, because he's going to be looking for that early finish, and when he doesn't get it, he might be in trouble. So I'm going to take the dog here. I think Vince Morales finds a way to win. And just look at the betting odds, man. Like, money has come in on Vince Morales. Vince Morales is normally a bigger underdog than what we're seeing currently, so I think people kind of know what's up with Elijah Smith. I don't think that he's quite there yet. I think Vince Morales finds a way to win. Give me Vince Morales to win this fight by decision. Next, we have a fight between Valter Walker and Don'Tale Mayes. I'm going with Valter Walker, and I don't really have to go too deep into this, because Don'Tale Mayes, I just don't know what the hell I'm looking at sometimes when I'm watching him fight. I ain't never seen a guy this big come off his feet as much as he does, right? I see him trying to throw jumping kicks and flying knees. Sometimes he's jumping in the air and throwing punches. I don't know what he's doing. And we've talked about this before. For a guy who has spent so much time in the same room as Jon Jones, you would think that he's getting better, but I don't think that he is. Now, on the other side, Valter Walker is in a much better training situation. And you might think, well, training with Jon Jones, he's the best. How could you get a better training situation than that? I don't think training with Jon Jones makes you all that much better. Like, how often did we see guys fight out of the same gym as Conor McGregor and not get much better? You're much better off competing against guys at your level than you are just, you're here and the guy that you train with is all the way up here. You want to train with people that are right here so you can catch up, and then you find some other people are right there, and then you catch up, and then you catch up, and then you catch up. And I think that is partially why we haven't seen a whole lot of growth out of Don'Tale Mayes. I think Valter Walker has more ways to win this fight, especially with his takedowns. I think he's going to get takedowns at will here. I think he probably finishes this fight in the first or second round with a submission because he's going to be selling out to get to the legs, get the fight to the ground. Don'Tale Mayes is a big dude, so it's going to take a lot for him to get back up to his feet. And I like that gym that Valter Walker's training out of. I think that's the same one as like Bogdan Guskov and Bogdan Grad, I believe. So give me some Valter Walker to get it done. I think that he wins inside the first 2 rounds by submission. And for this last one, Julia Avila, she's fighting Jacqueline Cavalcante this week. You could just see the gray hair, and she's not Storm. She's not Rogue, all right? She's just getting old. She's getting up there in age. She hasn't fought in a very long time. And this woman on the right-hand side of your screen is a murderer. I think it's easy work for Jacqueline Cavalcante this week. I think she's going to throw a lot more strikes. She's going to land at a higher clip, and she's going to put it on Avila, who's been out of action for way too long. I didn't even know she was still involved. And the betting line would suggest as much, right? Jacqueline Cavalcante is a giant favorite, so it's not overcomplicated. I think she starts us off on the right foot this week. Give me Cavalcante to win this fight by decision. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. I wish you the best of luck at UFC Vegas 102, and I will see you next week.